Will Storr, welcome to the Development by David podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, David. How are you doing?
I am phenomenal, really phenomenal, because I get to inflate my status by saying I've had the legendary Will Storr on my podcast today. How about that, Will?
Yeah. Great, thank you. Well, it's great to be here.
When people ask you, what do you do? How do you bring that to life, Will?
Well, I just tell them I'm a writer. That's pretty much it. Sometimes people say, "How do you want to be introduced to things?" And I say, "Well, I'm a writer." And it's not. I think they're a bit disappointed. I thought they want something a bit more complicated, but it's as simple as that, really.
Do our introductions change based on what environments we're in?
Well, I think our sense of self changes a bit depending on what we know, what environment that we're in. People have multiple versions of their identity, and depending on who they're with, different versions of who they are come to the fore at different times.
Why would that morph?
Well, because we are, we're always playing these different kinds of status games. We're all different kinds of people in different social environments, and different parts of our identity become differently important depending on who we're with. So when we're at the gym, we're a different version of ourselves than when we're at the play school picking our kids up, or whatever. It's a different facets of our identity become activated depending on who we're with and what we're doing.
Well, you introduce yourself as a writer, and many people may have seen your incredible book, The Status Game, but I've started delving into some of your previous works. What are some of the fascinating features that you've written about since your 20s?
The fascinating, what did you say,
Features,
features?
yeah, yeah, or features
Yeah.
of life.
Oh, features of life. Oh, right. Well, I mean, I write a lot about um psychology, but really about how psychology impacts our day-to-day life, our day-to-day experience of ourselves, but also the big picture of economy and society and history.
What encouraged you or empowered you, or what raised the necessity for you to write about status? Is there a universal hamstring or symptom that our societies are facing based on status games or status seeking behavior?
Well, I mean, I think the reason I wanted to write about status is because it's this universal thing that people need. I think for a long time, um, it was assumed, and people still imagine, that status is just a nice to have. That it's nice that when we feel respected and valued by the people around us. Nice to feel when we're succeeding in our lives, but we now know that it's not just a nice to have; it's an essential. It's an essential resource that the psychology needs in order to feel good, and feel like we're thriving. And it's not only essential to our psychology; it's also essential to our biology. Like if we feel um, um, a lack of status, we can become very badly physically ill as well. So it's an incredibly important um, part of the human experience. And but it's a part of the human experience that people feel very uncomfortable talking about. I think that's why there haven't been that many books written about it. I think people are very easy and willing to talk about the other side of the coin, which is about connection and belongingness, because that's nice, and it feels kind of it says something nice about the human animal. But they're much less comfortable talking about status. It makes people very uncomfortable.
I wonder if the listener, and perhaps including myself, might think that status has only played a part of our existence since the introduction of TV, if not then social media. But from your work, I have found out that status has been part of our evolutionary biology, and part of our ancestors' DNA. How does the lineage of status seeking behavior or the importance of status date back to tribal times?
Well, we've been interested in status since before we were human. I mean, lots of animals play status games. Hens peck each other until a pecking order is established. It's how social life amongst animals is organised. If there wasn't a status hierarchy, it would be all war all the time, because people would be constantly acting as if they could do what they wanted, and they could have any resources they wanted. So you have to have a system whereby people's position in the hierarchy is established, so you're not constantly fighting each other. People kind of have to things kind of have to know their place in that way. So that's how in the animal kingdom, there are status games that are played, but in the animal kingdom it's about dominance. It's very much about dominance, hierarchies, and aggression, and being top dog or top hen or whatever it might be. In the human world, we play these other status games, which don't involve coercion and violence, and those games are really about being prestigious. And there are two ways of getting a prestige based reputation. The first way is by earning kind of virtue based status, so we can get a reputation of being kind or giving, or somebody that is knowing the rules and following them, disciplined. So that's a virtue based status. And then there's also the other kind of status, which is competence based status. So it's about being successful, by being good at what you do, and by knowing something about the world which is valuable, and producing value for other people. So those are the three main status games: dominance games, virtue games, and success games. And virtue and success, I mean, some animals, though, is sometimes argued to have a kind of prestige, like a wise old elephant will lead the younger elephants to a source of water. Then the younger elephants will defer to that wise old elephant, knowing that they have the wisdom to know where the water is. But of course, that's a very basic kind of status practice. Humans take these prestige based games to incredible lengths and degrees.
I've heard you describe as status as the original evolutionary currency. Across the
Mm.
three layers or facets of status, dominance, virtue, and success, is there one that has a higher exchange rate in currency terms in today's society? Because I can
Well,
imagine dominance was something that served such a great purpose in medieval times, for example. Does that level of what could be perceived as power, could that be misconstrued or tarnished in today's more woke, progressive society as such?
Well, I don't know that. I think it would be a bit simplistic to kind of say, like, we certainly live in a world today compared to 200 or 300 years ago, where success-based status is incredibly important. Like, for most of our animal existence, dominance was most important. For most of human existence, it was probably virtue plus dominance, but virtue, because that's the religious era. That's the era of kings and emperors. It's all about being about knowing your place and staying within it. It's about um, being obeying, worshipping the right gods, and worshipping the right emperors and kings and queens, and being deferent. So that was all of human life up until the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, and then starting in the West, the Great Western idea was this individualism, where individual status was more important than the status of the group, and a lot of that is about success and competence, and actually we're going to compete on who can come up with the best idea, who can create the best invention. And that's the Industrial Revolution, and that changed everything. So relatively speaking, success games are more important. This idea is spread around the world now. It's a Western idea, but it's spread around the world. And it's the West's great contribution to humanity, I think, this idea of individualism and the dominant, the preeminence of success games. Um, but you mentioned wokeness. I think wokeness is all about virtue. Wokeness is kind of. I think in the rise of wokeness, we see a rise in people playing games of virtue in order to earn status, and that's certainly what a lot of it is. You see a lot of very privileged people, playing these virtue-based status games in order to feel better about themselves, and to signal to other people that they are superior in virtue-based status than other people.
Is that why many people donate to charity or not donate to charity, but perhaps donate to charity in public, or they, for example, will donate food or money to the homeless person on the street, because not only does it serve merit and goodwill for the person receiving it, but their social status, at least to themselves, improve. I, I was on I got taught by Seth Godin on his alt MBA, and he brought to me this concept of singer's paradox. Have you came across that before? So
No.
I might be completely bastardizing it here, Will, but the concept is Professor Singer or teacher, Mr. Singer asked his class, if you were late to class and you were going past a pool or a pond and you saw a young kid fall in the pond, would you save the individual? And
Mm,
everyone said yes, of course. I would definitely save the
mm,
individual. I'd save the kid in this public park. I would do what I could. It didn't matter if I was going to be late for class. I would save the
mm,
kid in front of everyone. And he then professed that we have the ability to save a life every single day by donating $20 to UNICEF or $20 to the Red Cross. But because there's no visibility of that merit, there's no visibility of that contribution, we don't do it. Um,
mm.
so I guess the question I'm posing is, are we charitable in nature when it's publicly performed in order for our
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to what you just said. Like, it's definitely true that we have that virtue is social. So we have evolved to want to maintain a reputation in our tribe as being virtuous, and that means being selfless and courageous and all of those things. And that's why often um, the virtue is public, and usually it is. I mean, most people who do altruistic acts only do it for their own tribe, be it a political tribe or a literal kind of racial tribe or a local tribe. So that's certainly true. But I also think there's something that we think of as self signaling. So everybody carries within them an invisible audience, which is like an invisible kind of internal tribe, which judges their behavior, and that's part of our tribal cognition. So we often think of that thing as our conscience. So when we do something, even privately, that is wrong, we can feel guilt and shame about that thing. And when we do something, um, even privately, which is good, we can feel great pride. So that's just part of our tribal cognition. That's part of our incentive system that's still interested in us maintaining our reputation, but it's kind of saying you did a good thing, you did a bad thing. And I think that's also going on with the example that you gave. I think that there's um part of the problem with simply putting that down to the audience is that when you're actually rescuing somebody from a pond who's in front of you, you get a very powerful self-signaling of, oh my god, I did this amazing thing. You wouldn't believe it. But I think the problem with donating $20 to UNICEF is that you don't see it. You don't see that child that you saved. And I think if you did, yeah, it's the immediacy and it's the self-signaling is you don't actually get to feel that good about yourself compared to if you actually got to see the kid being saved. So I think I think there's also a self-signaling aspect to it, but it really all does reduce to the same thing, which is that we're playing a status game, and virtue is a status game. It's very naive to think it isn't. We're not virtuous because unless if you're a religious, you can quite happily believe that we're virtuous because we're made in the image of God and God is virtuous. But if you're not religious, there's got to be a reason why we're virtuous, and the reason why we're virtuous is that we're wired for the tribe. We're wired to develop a reputation for being somebody that will put the tribe's interest before our own personal selfish interest. So that's why that's the incentive for being virtuous is we were rewarded with status when we develop that reputation.
When it becomes apparent that someone is seeking status, whether it's through dominance, success, or more cushioned through virtue,
Mm.
does our status diminish or decrease when it's apparent that we're seeking such?
Yeah, yes, it does. There's a weird part of our cognition. We hide from ourselves our interest in status, and that's the reason for that is again because of the tribal context. Status is a resource like food is a resource, and nobody wants to get a reputation of being, I want all the food, I want all the food, I want all the food. If somebody was in the tribe, in Hunter Gatherer tribe, saying, I want all the food, give me all the food, they'd be shunned and attacked. So it's the same with status. Everybody in the tribe wanted status. And if somebody was walking around saying, I demand all the status, that's a resource that is being greedily in an entitled way taken from other people. So we've evolved to be very almost allergic to admitting our own personal interest in status, even though it's very obvious that everybody is interested in their own status. I mean, you've only got to insult somebody even mildly and they'll feel really upset and aggrieved and preoccupied with it, and that's because their status has been undermined. So it's this weird relationship we have with status where it's very obvious that we're all very interested in our own position, but and our own respect and our own value, but we don't like to admit it even to ourselves. And so it brings this there's a concept which is sometimes referred to as one downmanship, which I think is really funny. And there was that viral clip of Victoria Beckham with David Beckham, and she was trying to claim that, is that sense of, oh, I was working class, and he was saying, no, what car did your dad drive you to school in? Oh, we had these different cars, and he had to drag it out of her that it was a Rolls Royce, and and everyone was laughing. But that's classic human behaviour. That's what we all do. People. Of course, there are cultural differences. America and some Asian cultures are a bit more status forwards. But even those people that are quite showy and blingy, behind their backs, people are often talking them down, going, "What a dickhead! What an asshole!" And that kind of Asian-ish, American-ish, very status claiming kind of forward personality often triggers rivalries. They don't make things easy for themselves because they trigger people to either slag them off and to deride them behind their backs, which reduces their status, or they trigger rivals. People will go, all right, then if you think you're the number one, I'll show you, and they get into all these conflicts all the time. So it doesn't work swaggering around in the human world claiming status for yourself. People don't like it.
No, it's almost as like I'm thinking about times in school where, um, for example, in school, university, when someone came back after the summer break and they've put contact lenses in and not had the kind of glasses, or they've lost a bunch of weight, or they've
Yeah,
dyed their hair, or they dress differently.
yeah,
And previously people said they were pretty, but they come back owning that kind of beauty, or that standard,
yeah,
and then people start calling them like vain as such. Or it's
yeah,
when the kind of
yeah,
quiet kid in class started to crack jokes, and then you discover that he's really funny, and then he starts to own that. He becomes arrogant or cocky.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost like we don't like when people own their subliminal labels.
No, because status is relative, and the more somebody in our group goes up in status, the lower we feel relative to them. So if somebody's acting as if they're up there, then that makes us feel like they're saying that we're down here. So we respond in a way that to pull them back down again. It's very human, and again, it's a result of our obsessive interest in our own status. Like they always say about the media, they like to build people up and pull them back down again. But that's not the media. That's human beings. That's what we do. If somebody gets, it's like you're seeing it with a bit with Taylor Swift at the moment. She's one of the most famous people in the world, and she's put a new album out. It's by all accounts not her best work, and people are kind of reveling in this. Oh, she's put her foot wrong. Brilliant, So it's the human world. It's the human world. It's confronting to see somebody, as you say, owning their own status, and it's partly not how the human game works. So a functional status game, status is given freely by other people. So somebody impresses us with being virtuous or successful, and we respond in our own free will by saying, "Wow, that was an amazing thing that you did. I respect that." And there are all kinds of ways that we respond to them in status. That's how it should work. It's not supposed to work that somebody walks in and goes, "Give me status." That's not how the human game's supposed to work. So that's when there's a perception that someone's doing that, it's it is a almost a well, it is it's a corruption of how human society is supposed to work. Status, prestige is supposed to be given freely by other people in response to an act that has earned that status.
Super fascinating stuff, Will. I also remember reading or hearing you speak about how the this status-seeking behavior is hardwired into our almost neurology. I think the term you use like
Mm.
a status detection device or status
Yeah,
detection
yeah,
system. What
yeah.
what role does that play in our human makeup?
Well, some neuroscientists talk about the status detection system. Others talk about, they call it the hierometer, as in the hierarchy. It's the thermometer that measures our place in the hierarchy. So they're just referring to the parts of the subconscious brain that's constantly measuring where we sit versus other people in the social hierarchies of our life. And you can't turn this thing off. You know, it's been there for millions of years. It's been there since before we were human. Um, we are constantly measuring the status other people are affording us, and then if they feel, if it feels that we're not being afforded the status we deserve, we become preoccupied with that, and we wonder why, and we start adjusting our behavior and start thinking about that. You can think of it as you just stepping into a lift in a hotel, and your brain immediately sorts the hierarchy in the lift. Who's the member of staff, who's got the cleaning trolley, who's got the the Louis Vuitton suitcases going up to the penthouse floor. Where are you? Like, this person's standing really close to me, that's disrespectful. It's just, it just never stops. It never stops. This thing is always going on. I mean, being a pasty middle-aged white man on Bondi Beach in Sydney, your status detection system goes haywire. You just feel, oh, you feel terrible, you feel awful. So it's, so you can't control this thing, and that's why this idea of, that some people have, of this utopian idea that one day we're going to have a world without hierarchy, without tops and bottoms, and most of us in the middle, is utterly delusional. It's because it's built into the structure of our brains. They tried that in the Soviet Union to create a world of pure equality where there were no status hierarchies, and it was an absolute catastrophe. Not just in the blood and torture, but also in the fact that it was one of the most hierarchical societies to ever exist. All they did was, they didn't get rid of the hierarchy; they just flipped it so that the people that used to be at the bottom were now at the top, and the people that were at the top were now at the bottom, and the people that were on the bottom were savagely discriminated against. The social class of your parents was written on your passport. So the children of the former bourgeoisie and the middle classes were brutally discriminated against. Yeah, you can't eradicate this stuff from human societies because it's built into our brains. It's how we think. It's how we behave.
Oh my god, well, that's such a revelation. Honestly, it's incredible stuff. Something I really enjoyed reading about your work is that how metrics of status change based on their environment. For example, I think the example you give is age, like age by a pool. It's
Yeah.
better to be young by a pool and older on a queue for a bus, for example.
Well, yeah, it's just this idea that your status is context dependent.
Mhm.
Um, it- and it's a, like, so being old is low status by the pool, or on Bondi Beach, indeed. But on the train, you get the seat. It's more high status on the train, and that's how it works across status games. So people talk a lot about privilege in this day and age, especially male privilege and white privilege. But that privilege is really dependent on the group. If you're a white male working in a female dominant company, then your gender is not going to be a privilege. It's going to be the other way around. It's going to be, you're going to be probably be discriminated against by the women who are privileged in that world. I mean, if you're a white man who wants to be a hip hop artist, you're going to struggle, probably because that's a black, like in the Eminem film 8 Mile Explored. He didn't have white privilege when he was trying to break into the hip hop scene. There's always the feminists say that the women have got to be like 10 times better than men. He actually had to be, like, better than, a lot of the black dudes. Like, he had to be incredibly, incredibly good to be accepted by the hip hop artists in that world. And that's just how status games work. Privilege exists, but it's context dependent. Sure, if you're going into a world that's dominated by straight white males, then straight white males are going to have some form of privilege in that group, unless they go to great lengths to eradicate it. But if you're a straight white male going into a female dominant world, like the world of fiction publishing in England, in the UK, it's very female dominant, then that maleness is going to work against you. It's going to be low status to be a man.
So is the Grand Theft Auto cheat code or the hack here to find out your level, an a domain which you have either dominance, success, or virtue in, and finding the most apt or easy to access environment to display that?
No, I don't think it's about easy, because if it's easy for you, it'd be easy for other people, and if it's easy for other people, it's going to be quite a liquid, dilute status game. I think that the cheat code is finding the thing that you're quite good at and just going for that. Like it's really like not about money. I think we're raised to feel like we've got to find the game that's going to pay the most money, but there's you know very weak relationship between money and job satisfaction. Study after study has found what makes us feel good and what gives us lives of meaning and purpose is feelings of connection, so we're connected to the people around us, but also that status that those people value us. And so as long as we find that thing, that game that we can play in life that we're quite good at, that we can offer better than average value at, that's the thing to go for. That's the thing that's going to give you that's going to give your life meaning and purpose and protect you from misery, anxiety, suicidal ideation, that kind of thing.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm only presenting my worldview based on the domains that I've entered in my life. Most of the domains I've entered, whether it's podcasting or stand-up comedy, I've
Mm,
always had to start at the bottom of the pecking order. I've always had to have a
mm,
level of incompetence before competence.
mm, mm.
So for the listener who might be like, okay, that's great, Will, but I currently suck at everything and I'm too scared to publicly expose how bad I suck at all these things I want to try. Is being incompetent before competent a feature of gaining status?
Of course, yeah. Nobody ever walks into a game and is immediately good at that thing. That's what narcissists think. That's the definition of a narcissist: somebody that thinks they could just walk into any game and deserve immediately to be treated as a high status individual. That they're competent, they're good at that thing. You're always going to start off um, incompetent at any competence game that you play, but it's about finding out what you enjoy. Like a huge part of success is motivation, and a huge part of motivation is um just how much do you enjoy it. When you're doing this thing, do you feel completely lost in it? Like, do you lose your sense? Do you lose track of time? If that's true, then carry on doing that thing, even if you're shit at it at the beginning. That joy will motivate you to do it again and again and again, and get better and better and better until you actually start moving up that status game. So it really is, what do you enjoy doing? What's that thing that you love doing that you find yourself talking about all the time and boring the crap out of your girlfriend about? That's the thing. Even if you're rubbish at stand up, everyone's rubbish at stand up when they start stand up. That's how stand up works. But if you're obsessed with stand up and love Bill Burr and love, all the Patrice and all the greats, and you really feel that one day you could do that thing, you understand what's good about them, you understand what makes them good, then go for it, and take those cuts and bruises, because everybody takes those cuts and bruises. It is part of working your way up that game.
Oh, I think that's going to be my trailer clip for this, Will. That was phenomenal. Either that or I'll set it as my alarm in the morning to get me out of bed. That was some motivational shit. I liked it a lot.
Uh,
But I love that. Like, the dream life is not having no problems, it's having problems that you're willing to solve, or
yeah,
having
exactly.
complexities that you're willing to solve. I love it. I
Yeah,
really do.
great.
I can materialize in my mind some of the status symbols that hold utility, like money, perhaps.
Yeah.
Status within an organization is perhaps one of them as well. I can understand how that leads to social mobility or promotion. But what are some of the ridiculous and dumbfounded, silly status games that we play? Or what are some of the things we strive for that just don't make sense or have any utility?
I mean, God, at the risk of sounding like a boomer, which I'm not, I'm Gen X, but like I have to say, the influencer world is one of those, the Instagram kind of influencer world, where like I understand it, where people are kind of showing their lives and selling their lives, but I just but it's but you sort of question what value are you offering the world? These people who have half a million Instagram followers and show the pictures of their holidays, and they're going to the Maldives and stuff. That's tapping into our basic status hierarchy. These people, are high status. They're beautiful. They have glamorous lives, and people have become fascinated by them. But it seems to me that they're actually offering very little value to the world. Like when I was growing up, people wanted to be writers, wanted to be musicians, wanted to be filmmakers. Like, and so these are status gains which offer huge value to people. That's a successful filmmaker is entertaining and moving and adding meaning to the lives of hopefully millions of people that who go and watch their films. But these days, when studies are run asking children what they want to be when they grow up, it's often influencer, YouTuber, and so I obviously it's a bit different what you do. For me, you're like a journalist, so you're offering value. Like hopefully you're going to get these guests, and they're going to have interesting conversations. You're offering value to people. So it's not that. It's those pure influencers who are just basically just selling product by showing pictures of their holidays. I think that this is a weird status game. I think it's one that just doesn't need to offer much value to the world.
Yeah. And I can imagine I would do this craft even no like, I would happily have this conversation one-on-one with you, Will, no matter who plugged into it or who tuned into it. I love the craft of podcasting, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't imagine an influencer enjoys some of the processes or some of the posts that they must create to garner such mass appeal on Instagram. I can't imagine that's enjoyable, and I might
yeah.
be wrong. They might be creative
And
and
it's also brutal as well because you see in the influencer world, you see the perils of putting yourself up there as a high status person, because a lot of these influencers just get absolutely torn apart in the comments, and people follow. Lots of people just hate follow them, and there are websites like Tattle Life where 90% women, it seems, just gather on there to just tear apart these other women who are who are making successes of their lives on Instagram and TikTok. So it's a weird it's a weird existence. It's a weird status game, but yeah, I
have you
can
came
understand it.
across the social media page? I think it's called Influencers in the Wild. Oh, it's hilarious. I must link it to you via email after this. But essentially, it's ordinary people capturing the behind the scenes of an influencer doing
Yeah,
a shoot in public, and you see them
yeah,
dancing and being all
yeah.
elaborate and extroverted. And as soon as the camera's off, they're on their phone, like complaining or shouting to their friends to retake. It's hilarious stuff. It's like Instagram versus reality on steroids.
Yeah, there's a guy, I forget his name. Is it Joey Swall or is it the gym guy? I think that's the gym guy. There's a guy on YouTube that does like he's like a stand up. He has that stand up delivery, but do you know the guy I mean?
I know who
He's on
Joey
YouTube.
Swoll is. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Joey Swall's the guy with the hat in the gym. He's similar, but there's another guy I think he uses Instagram in the wild in his videos, and he's got this very sort of dry New York delivery, and does these sort of great commentaries about these people. Yeah, yeah, it's hilarious. I mean, you see it when you go traveling around the world. These poor these sort of social media cook husbands who are and boyfriends who are just there as a photo assistant, where their wives and girlfriends are in the sea and they're having to do it again and again and again and again. Like it's incredible to see.
I'm just back from Berlin over the weekend. I'm not sure if you
Mm.
visited Berlin in your 20s or even recently and enjoyed any of the kind of nightlife over there.
Not the nightlife, no. When I went to Berlin, it was with my girlfriend is now my wife, so it was kind of after I gave up all that stuff. But it's a fairly wild scene, isn't it?
Incredibly, but I guess my favorite part of it is how protective they are of the environment and culture. And what I mean by
Okay.
that is that when I went to one of their events, one of their dance events, they insist that you put stickers over the cameras of your screen.
Oh wow.
So much like gigs, I'm sure you've been to many in either the UK or broader. There's always people with the flash on filming the musician, and they're not very immersed in the experience.
Oh
Whereas
yeah,
absolutely enforce it within the nightlife scene in Berlin. And
that's
what
great.
that enables is that you enjoy it for enjoyment's sake, not for the status of
Yeah,
being in a cool Berlin dance event. Um, and, and
yeah,
and and rightfully so. Like the gig that I was at, or the event space that I was at, was basically, imagine like a indoor pool from like Scarface, for example, in one of like Tony Montana's mansions, for example, or maybe a B-roll in a Grand Theft Auto scene where there's an indoor swimming pool, palm trees indoors, and glass all around, and it was drained out, and there was a DJ on. It was fantastic, so cool. The first thing I wanted to do, well, was take a picture of it, but I couldn't.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it made, I don't know what it says about me, but the fact that it became so exclusive because I couldn't post about it actually made it higher status in my mind. I don't
yeah,
know if it had some
yeah.
sort of weird exclusivity bias or effect.
Well, I mean, I remember like years ago going to Soho Farmhouse, and there was there was I think they even put it on the menus. No photography, no phones. You know, like and it's good. It makes you feel. It does make you feel like you're somewhere a bit better, and it makes you feel kind of safer, that you can just sort of relax without worrying that someone's taking a picture. But I think also in the gig context, I think it's almost more profound than that. Really, I think that people have been gathering together to experience storytelling and music and ritual for hundreds of thousands of years, and part of it is in this sort of great community that we're all there as an audience, like listening to this music, dancing together, and there's something almost magic happens where you kind of your minds fuse, and you become this great being, this organism experiencing this music together. And the phone breaks that, because people aren't connecting in that way. They're filming, so they're completely removed from the kind of communal, kind of profound tribal thing that goes on at a great concert or in a great club.
You're right. Um, my last guest and fan of your work, Jimmy Carr, was speaking about that a couple of weeks ago. I think comedies, perhaps, or comedy clubs, are the last bastion of this. It's still a
Mm.
rule that's widely enforced. Um, It's yeah, Jimmy was he said that he's a drug dealer because he supplies both dopamine and serotonin, but the caveat is that we have the drugs on us. But as soon as you
Yes.
take out a phone, you're kind of pulling yourself out of the ayahuasca ceremony as such,
Yeah.
or that metaphorical ayahuasca ceremony. Um, there is like this weird shared experience that goes on, and as soon as you task switch of any kind, even if it's to speak to your friend, never mind go on your phone, you become, I guess, disengaged from that immersion. You're so right.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's it, and it's always sort of when you go to a gig, it's always dispiriting to see that kind of sea of phones. It's I mean, my favorite band, the Afghan Wigs, the singer strictly enforces a no phone policy. Stuart Lee famously, if he sees you filming his gig, he'll shove his phone up your ass, and there it will stay for the remainder of the set. So yeah, well, I mean, I think that's part of his, actually. He makes it look like he's doing that spontaneously, but I think he does it. There was a show he did where he did it every time, but yeah, you get the point. Like it's yeah, it kind of breaks the social contract. Really, it's you're not there to be a filmmaker. You're there to come together with all of us to enjoy this experience, this communal experience.
One person's work that I've enjoyed over the last couple of years, and someone that I've enjoyed who's came on the show, is Rob Henderson. Are you, are you
Oh,
familiar with
Bob,
Rob?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, I think you may have actually you've been mentioned in his new book, Troubled, in fact, or maybe in the kind of preface of it. I can't remember the
Oh,
acknowledgements.
okay, okay,
Um,
yeah, I read an early version of the book and fed back, so he's probably talking about that. Yeah.
oh, fantastic. Well, one of the concepts that I was introduced to by him was luxury beliefs, and how
Yes.
status through materialism has become more accessible than ever before. A lot of us can finance the nice car or finance the nice,
Mm.
I don't know, Burberry T-shirt. So the way like different social classes signal their status is through the beliefs that they hold. For example, upper class people are more likely to want to defund the police than the lower classes because there's less crime in those areas, for example. Are there any other forms of luxury beliefs that you see unfold in the work that you research and write about?
Well, like I feel that I'm, like it's not always the beliefs that we choose. We do so in that kind of calculated way. Like there are all kinds of examples of people having beliefs that actually don't do them any favors in that kind of calculated way. For example, in the UK, there's lots of working class people on the low socioeconomic scale that vote Conservative, even though voting Conservative is going to be less good for the welfare state and probably going to make their lives a bit more difficult. So there are all kinds of ways in which um, the beliefs that we choose um, aren't chosen in that kind of coldly utilitarian, calculated way. So I'm not sure that we do kind of choose our beliefs that way. And I think that yeah, so, but it's certainly true that people's beliefs are a status symbol, and always throughout history have been, a status symbol. Like, um, that's kind of how religion works, isn't it? And that's how cults work too. So yeah, the beliefs around which we earn status are the ones that become the most irrational. I think.
Should we be more, I guess, conscious of tight groups of people opposed to loose groups of people? I hear you write about tightness and looseness in some of your
Mm.
work. Who should we fear or embrace the most? What type of group?
Well, tightness and looseness is a concept in psychology that tends to be um, used to describe cultures. So a tight culture, maybe like Germany or Japan, is much more conformist. It's much more rule based, much more disciplined, and sort of looser cultures are much more kind of freewheeling, creative. And so what I did in the status game was I kind of ran with that theory, but also applied it to groups, because you can also say that about groups, can't you? That some groups are tighter, more conformist, more about absolutely following the rules, and some groups are much looser. So the tightest group of all is a cult, and in a cult, has a very strict set of rules. It's one of the things that defines it, and you absolutely have to follow those rules. And if you don't follow those rules, you're going to be punished. You're going to go down that status game. So for example, in the Heaven's Gate cult, there were rules about how much toothpaste you're allowed to put in your toothbrush, how much water you're allowed to put in your bath, exactly how scrambled eggs had to be cooked. So they had to be dry but not burned. So there's huge books of rules, books in Heaven's Gate, in the Heaven's Gate cult, and this is how cults are. And what cults offer is certainty. It's that sense that if you follow the rules, you are going to earn status. And of course, the evil trick of cults is that the rules are so hard to follow that it's almost impossible to earn status. So it creates a bunch of very needy, desperate people who never feel that they can achieve what they want to achieve. But that's the tightest group of all is a cult. And then one down from that is a religion. A religion is just a looser version of a cult, where it's still very rule based, it's still very moralistic, it's still a status game where the better you know the rules and the closer you follow the rules, the higher you're going to go up the totem pole. So the tighter groups are the most deranged, certainly, because they're the ones that are um, more determined that you're going to believe their beliefs, swallow their story, follow their rules, and completely obey the internal rules of the status game.
Are there any modern day cults that are kind of hidden in plain sight? I don't want to say like the army, for example, because there's immediate ranks. You can see the ranks in the army. People can garner more
Yeah.
status, but like the closest thing that I can think of in my life is the army because my dad's a veteran. But you're very
Okay.
much brought so close together that you would die for your brother or sister on the battlefield. But I wouldn't say an army's a cult, but is there any other kind of modern day groupings that are close to or could be conflated with a cult?
Yeah, there's lots. I mean, one of them I was introduced to recently. I worked on a book called Humanize with an architect called Thomas Heatherwick. And he's a very brilliant British architect. He's a designer and he designs buildings amongst lots of other things. And he is despised in the world of architecture because he doesn't like the big shiny rectangular boxes that all the other architects like. And I was gobsmacked when I started working with him because I always assumed that the reason we have these big shiny boxes everywhere is because it's, you know, Britain got bombed to buggery in the Second World War and that's what got put up. But it turns out that that's actually what modern architects like. And in modern architecture, there's this. It's like it is. I mean, he said it's a cult. He told me he said it's like a cult, and he was absolutely right. It is like a cult. Um, they all really love brutalism, concrete, steel, shiny glass. They hate beauty. They hate decoration. They hate the kinds of buildings that the vast majority of normal people love, which is buildings that are beautiful, show something of the place, the culture, kind of warm, have curves and rather than straight lines. And there was an extraordinary study that was done by a British psychologist where he looked at he wanted to know because one of the things that shows it's a cult is that it's not as though when a young architect is educated and goes to the architecture process of becoming an architect that they all end up these individual visionaries with these different ideas about what's great and what isn't, and like say in music, for example, or literature where there tends to be lots of different ideas about what's great. um, they all end up like in the same fucking shiny boxes. They all build the same buildings. They all look the same. Like, all around the world, they look the same. It's unbelievable. So how does that happen? This is a guy called David Halpern, a British psychologist, David Halpern, who's now in charge of the government's nudge unit. And so he got some first year architecture students. And the first thing he did was he wanted to figure out, do they just have a different aesthetic taste to everybody else in terms of beauty? So they got the architecture students to rate faces, human faces, and which ones do you find beautiful, which ones do you find ugly? And then he compared their ratings with ordinary people, with non-architects, and there was the same. They felt the same about the human beauty. So, okay, well, about buildings then. And it was, it wasn't quite as the same, but it was roughly the same. These first year architecture students, they liked the same kinds of buildings that ordinary people liked. But then he kept testing them as they went through the architecture process. And every year in architecture school, they became more and more divergent away from what everybody else liked. And they became more and more loyal to this um, modern architecture aesthetic of big, boring concrete and glass and steel shiny boxes, and that's what they all liked, and that's cult thinking, because they're literally the only people in the world that like these fucking buildings, but they all like them, and that's why cities around the world all end up looking the same, because they're all in the same cult, and you really got a sense of the cult when the book was published, because we wrote about this in the book. And Thomas is disliked because he doesn't build these. He builds buildings with curves, curvy. He said he once, when he was a young architect, put a tiny curve above a window, and an architect went, "God, you're brave." And he was like, "Brave? There's a curve. What are you talking about?" But that's the world he was going into. And he got, when that book was published, he got savaged. I mean, the architecture critics of the Guardian, I think, wrote 3 pieces about him, all separate. One of them, absolutely savaging him. One of them said, all he's doing in this book is saying, we want interesting buildings. The buildings are boring. Give us interesting buildings. And they actually said he was dangerous. The book was, he said, my worry is this book's going to be successful because this is a dangerous book. So that's the cult. I mean, poor Thomas, he was absolutely savaged for writing that book, for writing a book that had the very modest goal of wanting to make buildings less boring. So I think architecture is a cult that's hiding in plain sight. Nobody wants the shit they build. We want streets, we want beauty, we want culture. But what we get is boring box after boring box after boring box after boring box, because there's a cult in charge of our building world all around the world.
Oh my god, I did not expect that as an answer to that question. Oh my god, that
Yeah.
is super fascinating, and I guess these cults exist in every other domain, but in this instance, architects are the sole people that are responsible for buildings. Whereas, for example, if you tried to create a cult around orange being the best color to exist, then there's always going to be people that prefer other colors and will embrace that within their living standards, their furniture, and everything else. But whereas the dominance, or sorry, the dominance in terms of skill set is solely attributable to people that are architects, then they are the
That's
dictators of the entire landscape.
yeah, and the point Thomas made very astutely in the book, which I think is completely correct, is that this is modern architecture, it's modernism. Modernism is a kind of artistic movement that began 100 years ago in the 1920s, really, or in the 1910s, 20s. And modernism is all about, we don't care about emotions, we don't care about beauty, we care about ideas, and it's all about the intellectual idea. And he said that's fine if you're writing a book like Ulysses, or doing some conceptual art, with like a big urinal and putting it on the wall and saying that's art. That's fine, because people can choose whether or not to buy that book or go and see that art. But you can't choose how our cities look. You can't choose how our towns look. They inflict that shit on everybody, and that's why it's such a crime. It's like because it's fine to have this kind of weird esoteric tastes in buildings that 80% of people don't share, 25% of people don't share, but you inflict it on everybody else. And other people have to walk past these buildings every day. They have to live in these buildings and work in these buildings. And that's why it's so catastrophic. The kind of relentless and kind of awesome power of this cult that's been there for 100 years now. They've been building these same buildings, these blocky buildings, for 100 years now, and they're still going strong and refusing to build streets, the streets that everybody wants to be built.
Is that also an example of a buried signal? I learnt from David Pinsoff, the Cards Against Humanity co-founder, that a buried
Okay.
signal is a signal that is only understood and valued by a select group of people that know the intricacies about it. Um,
Yeah, I've never heard that phrase before, but that's absolutely right. So one of the mind blowing moments I had with Thomas. So Thomas designed a really amazing space in London called Coal Drops Yard. He converted two old Victorian coal sheds into this beautiful space that's sort of full of shops and businesses now. And we were walking to Coal Drops Yard, and he sort of pointed to this building, and he said, "That's won awards, that building." And I was like, "You're fucking joking!" And he was like, "No, people love that. People love that building." And it was just a fucking glass box. That was it. Glass walls and a glass door. It's like, how can that possibly have won awards? And he said, because you see the glass there. I said, yes, is it slightly white? I was like, you are joking. He's like, I'm not joking. And he was surprised that I was surprised. They love that. I guess that would be a sign of a buried signal. Like honestly, I swear to you, 99.9% of people walking past that building wouldn't even look twice at it. It's another glass box in downtown London. But for the architects, it's this buried signal. Oh, look at the glass. Look at that sheen on the glass. It's beautiful. I've no doubt that the world of modern art, like if you were to show one of these cult members the cityscape of fucking Shanghai or whatever, they'd be able to tell you a million reasons why this building is better than this building because of look at this fenestration and stuff. But for most of us, we just can't see it because it's just another glass box, another concrete box, another steel box.
I'm trying to think of other examples of buried signals. Some examples come to mind whereby designer brands collaborate with streetwear brands. So when,
Mm.
like, for example, Gucci would collaborate with Adidas on a pair of three stripe trainers, and yes, the three stripe trainers are known as, or the Sambas, for example, are known as being very working class kind of streetwear industrial shoes. But when they have the green and red three stripe and there's like a X Gucci kind of woven on the heel, then to a select amount of people that are maybe sneakerheads, they will know that's a high status shoe. But it's only to
Well,
that select few.
yeah, the world of fashion is full of this stuff. So in the status game, I write about the study that was looked at the size of the logo on the clothes, and the bigger the logo, the lower status, the lower the status. So really big logos is low status, and the very small logos, and at the very top of that kind of handbag, for example, status game, there are no logos, but the people who understand that world of handbags can see by the stitching, can see by the tiniest details that this is the real deal. This is a extremely expensive handbag. So to me, and I expect you, a handbag is a handbag, and we wouldn't be able to tell a £200 handbag from a £20,000 handbag. But believe me, my wife would be able to tell you the difference between a £200 handbag and a £20,000 handbag, because she can read those signals. Yeah.
Well, I've loved reading about your career, and one of the books that I bought of yours that I'm still to read, but I absolutely am hooked already by the description of it, is The Heretics,
Oh right,
whereby
yeah.
some of your life experiences, by the way, Will, are phenomenal. When I've listened to you on certain podcasts, but this one goes above and beyond all when you follow a gentleman called David Irving and his band of neo
Oh
Nazis.
yes,
Can you tell me
yeah.
about that?
David Irving. So David Irving is so the Heretics is about an investigation into how and why otherwise intelligent people can end up believing crazy things. And David Irving is a historian, an extremely intelligent man, extremely learned man. Was once a highly respected historian of the Second World War. We know about the firebombing of Dresden in large part because of David Irving's, impressive scholarship on the subject. But at some point, David Irving decided that Hitler was, in his words, a friend of the Jews, and he knew nothing of the Holocaust. It was all hidden from him, and the Holocaust was actually orchestrated by the people beneath him. And so this is obviously fucking nuts, completely mad. So I wanted to hang out with David, and my book to find out what the hell was going on with this. And so David is, one of the things that's extraordinary about him is that he's absolute adherence to his version of the truth of the Second World War. He's completely convinced. It's not a pose. It's real, to the extent that he, this, because this counts as Holocaust denial in certain parts of the world. And he actually went to prison in his 70s because he refused to acknowledge that 6 million Jews died during the Holocaust. I think that was what it was. And he was sent to prison. And so, he's banned from Germany. He's lost his career. He's lost everything, really, by deciding to believe this particular thing and holding on to it. And one of the things that he did at the time to make money was to run kind of historical tours of Holocaust sites outside of Germany where he was allowed. And of course, to be fair to Irving, I would not describe him as a neo-Nazi, but lots of his followers are neo-Nazis, like proper Nazis with actual Nazi tattoos. And yeah, so I went undercover on one of these trips for a week, looking around Holocaust sites in Poland with these people. It was kind of scary at times. It was quite intimidating. It was odd. It was a very odd experience.
These group of people are usually well-informed, intelligent people. What did you understand about them that made them believe such radical and dumb ideas if they're so well-informed and
Well,
clever?
well, for the neo Nazis on the trip, the big moment of revelation for me came on the last night of the trip. So every day we would go out on a day trip to some, like a concentration camp or a museum, or one day we went to Hitler's old destroyed bunker in the woods and clambered about the ruins, and then we'd come back to the hotel and there'd be like a lecture by David. And on the last night, instead of the lecture, we were going to watch the film Downfall, which, as you might know, is the German film, sort of hyper realistic film set and it's basically telling the true story of the final 7 days in the life of Hitler. It's set in the Hitler bunker in Berlin during the fall of Berlin. So it's very intense, very brilliant film. And one of the guys on the trip said he couldn't watch Downfall with us. And the reason that he couldn't watch Downfall with us is because his father was in the bunker with Hitler and died there, and he would find it too upsetting to watch. Yeah, exactly. And then it clicked because all the way through, all these middle-aged men in late middle age, had pretty much all of them, not all of them, but pretty much all of them had parents that had served with the Nazis in the Second World War. And it suddenly occurred to me that actually these were boys that loved their dads and loved their mums, but they've been raised in a world in which the word Nazi is a synonym for evil, and they couldn't allow themselves to believe that. So instead of allowing themselves to believe that, they had to go on this cognitive mission, looking for evidence that the Holocaust was a hoax, and that's what they'd done. They'd become experts in all the reasons why the Holocaust is the hoax. So it was really a bunch of broken-hearted little boys that just didn't want to believe that mum and dad were evil, or had been tempted into evil by the Nazi story world.
Holy shit. I'm gobsmacked. I really am. And it kind of alludes on to some of your work within the science of storytelling. I think I read when I picked up a couple of years ago, or maybe 18 months ago, that our brains have us kind of by science have this kind of preset story, and we look for evidence that supports that story and
Mm.
disregards evidence that kind of counteracts that story. Is that true?
Yeah, that's called confirmation bias. So we have a model of the world in our heads, and everybody's model of the world is a little bit different. And the model of the world is very precious to us. It's how we organize ourselves. It's how we organize our lives. It's how we pursue status. We have a story about what is a good person, what is a bad person, what is the truth, what is false. And that's the world that we exist in. And it's always a very simplistic world. It's always a very distorted world because we're not God, we're not Jesus. We don't have the sole access to the truth of reality. So we're always on this cognitive mission to reassure ourselves that our story about the world is true. One of the ways we do that is by always hanging out with people that enjoying hanging out with people that have a similar story world to us. So, all the people on the Nazi trip with David Irving, even though Irving didn't like these neo-Nazis, I think because they were far more revisionist than he was, they all liked each other because they all agreed that the Holocaust was a hoax. And so they reaffirmed each other's story world. They were living examples of the fact that I'm right. But confirmation bias is we do that too by we're very good at spotting evidence that we're correct, and any evidence that we're not correct. We have all these different ways that we undermine that evidence. We say the person is biased and prejudiced. We say we look for one little flaw in the whole evidence and say, well, that flaw, look, it's ridiculous. We can just stop thinking about that now. Often we just simply forget it. So when people do studies and they encounter evidence that their story of the world is incorrect, they just forget it. Like their brains just disregard it. So there, that's confirmation bias. We have a bias to look for evidence that confirms our pre-existing story about the world.
My mind instantly goes to organizations, especially organizations that have a mantra of bring your whole self to work,
Mm,
whereby they foster or claim to foster an inclusive environment whereby you can bring in your opinion on whatever social cause, or you can bring in whatever taste and trait that you might have, or hobby or interest, or deranged family member and their tales. But in fact, when I think about an organization's values charter or their set of values, or even as simplistic as their mission statement, it almost
mm,
creates like a single story, a single point of truth. Like we are an organization that care about our clients more than anything else, and we care about climate change and sustainability. And I almost believe that that's almost counterintuitive, because surely an organization wouldn't want an individual to bring their whole self, because then it completely dissipates like uniform. Um,
yeah, yeah, it's nonsense. It's bullshit. So an organization is a status game. Like any human group is a status game, and an organization will have its own particular mission in the world, and you earn status within an organization for for the degree to which you contribute to the meeting of those objectives. So that's when you go to work. If you are a motivated employee, your story world will mesh with that story world. You'll be identified with their mission, and you'll feel good when you contribute to the mission of that group, whether they're selling trainers or selling smoothies or whatever it is. Now, if it's a political organization and your goal is to, I don't know, argue for reparations for slavery, for example, then fine, bring that to work and fight for reparations for slavery. But if you're going to work for a milkshake company that can't be your dominant goal in life, because you're going to be a hindrance to that organization. Your job is to sell milkshakes. It isn't to agitate for reparations for minorities because of slavery. So yeah, this idea of bringing a whole self to work is extremely naive. I don't, it just doesn't work. And we've seen, I think what we need to bring to work is the part of us which cares deeply about the mission of the organization, and also our individual sets of skills and talents. Like, everybody brings a different set of skills and talents and experiences to that organization. And I always think the perfect organization is like a band of superheroes. Everybody's got the same mission, fighting the same bad guy, but they've all got their individual stuff that they're bringing to it. So I think, to that extent, yeah, bring that to work, bring the stuff that's useful to work. But the other status games that you're playing, you need to leave those at home, because that's not the game we're playing in here.
I love that. I love it so much. One of the last questions I want to ask you about is the correlation between status, both high and low, and health outcomes. Are they synergistic and
Yeah.
symbiotic?
Yeah. So I think people know, it's quite widely known these days that how connection is bad, is important to our mental health, important to our physical health. And when we're lonely, we get physically ill. So, loneliness has been found to be worse for our health than a bad diet or a lack of exercise, which is quite an extraordinary finding. But what's less well known is that the same is true for status. So when we feel low status, we feel like we don't have enough respect and value, we can also become physically ill. And one of the big studies that looked at this was by a guy called Dr. Michael Marmot, who wrote a book called The Status Syndrome about all this. And they went into the British Civil Service, which is, of course, a highly stratified, enormous, big status game. And they found that as you go down the hierarchy, health outcomes get worse, lockstep. And this isn't about rich people at the top being able to afford better salads and more gym membership and all that stuff. This was completely separate to all of that. When they dealt with all the confounds, they found that for middle-aged people, those at the bottom of the office hierarchy had 4 times the risk of early death than those at the top. So massive differences in health outcomes. And this has been found in different contexts around the world. It's true for men. It's true for women. It's even been found true for monkeys. So one of the studies, they got a troop of monkeys in the lab, and they worked out the status hierarchy in the monkey troop. And they fed the monkeys this delicious diet of pizza and chocolate, and got them really unhealthy. Really raised their levels of atherosclerotic plaque. Those poor monkeys. And they found that just like in the civil service, the lower down the pecking order, the hierarchy the monkey was, the more likely they were to get ill as a result of their bad diet. And crucially, they conspired to change the monkey hierarchy, and the health outcomes changed in lockstep. So when there was a new alpha leader, that new alpha leader would suddenly become healthier. It would be healthier and be less likely to die than the one beneath them. So it's about status, and so that status detection system we were talking about is, it's not only monitoring our level of status, it's adjusting how our body works in response to how much status it feels that we have. And if it feels that we haven't got enough status, that we're quite low in the pecking order, it will put our body in this state of stress, of inflammation, of readiness for attack. And it's very wearing on the body to be in that state for a long period of time. And that's what leads to these bad health outcomes.
I feel like we've had a full loop around status, what it is, how it impacts us, and where it comes from. I love making this podcast as simplistic, as low hanging fruit as possible. So if the listener is like, well, if status will improve my life in the correct
Mm,
domains and it'll
mm,
improve my health outcomes, what are the
mm.
easiest next steps the listeners can take to improve their life via status?
Okay, so first thing, stop worrying about money, because money is, as I said, it's very there's almost no relationship between job satisfaction and money. Find the thing that you are good at, that you enjoy doing, and focus in on that thing. Watch out for virtue. Virtue is the easiest form of status to make. Any old prick can go on Twitter and start calling other people out and virtue signaling. It's like the sugar hit of the status world, virtue on social media. Um, go for competence, because competence is going to, you know, if you get competent at something, you're almost bulletproof. You know, you get an expertise in the world that nobody can take away from you. And also, I think as you get into middle age, I think it's really important to hedge. So start playing. You need to play. You want to play multiple status games if you can. So you shouldn't just have one route to status, because that makes you really vulnerable. If that thing goes wrong, you're screwed. And it's not just like, oh, I can't do that thing that I used to do for a living anymore. That's your identity. That's your self will dissolve. That's why people become very suicidal when their career, when they feel their careers, their status has been taken away from them. So hedge, like, you want to be playing a few different status games, have several sources of status, especially as you get into middle age. That's really important, because the competence stuff starts getting really hard when you get into your 50s and 60s, because you've got all these young, energetic, ambitious people snapping at your heels. And that's why, parenthood kind of does that in a natural way. I think when people have children, they start playing status games through their children. So they start, when their children succeed, they feel success too. But that's is also not quite enough. I think it's good to broaden out your life and have play these multiple games.
Wow. And that's so contrary to some of the toxic, I'm not going to call it toxic, some of the hustle porn entrepreneur stuff that I see on social media or on podcasts, which is find the singular thing in your 20s and work 20 hours a day at that one thing. And you've debunked that almost.
Well, it's
For
a
the
high
last few
risk strategy. I do think in your 20s you do need to focus on that one thing. Like, I think in your 20s that's the right thing to do. But beyond that, it's very high risk, because what if
Mm,
that thing goes wrong? It's not just that you are not doing so well in your career anymore. That's your identity. That's your sense of self. Like that's a serious hit to your extremely serious hit to your mental health if you focused all of your life, put everything into this one game, and then that game goes wrong. You're really in a bad place.
I've seen that unfold even in my mid 20s with some of my friends who have had like childhood sweethearts for perhaps
Yeah.
10 years from the age of 15 to 25. And very much that was their identity, this relationship, this partner that they had.
Mm.
And as they enter such a liminal period of their life, their mid 20s, and they've lost that person, um, I have seen my friends unfortunately become so deconstructed because of their sense of identity evaporating
Mm.
based on this breakup. And I can
Yeah.
imagine if that extrapolates into your mid 30s, like you said, or 40s or 50s, that's even more dangerous,
Yeah.
especially when the Matthew effect takes center stage, or the Matthew principle takes center stage later on in life, or like, for example, when looks or youth is more valued
Yeah.
as you get older. I can imagine that's quite dangerous. And I had a conversation with one of my mentors recently who is a CEO at a large French asset manager. And I asked him, well, we don't work together in the same organization any longer, but you still continue to mentor me. Why do you do that? He said, David, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, it's because anytime you do something that's cool, I get to attribute a little bit of my status and success to that, even if I don't.
Great. That's wise.
And he doesn't share it with anyone, even if it's just he feels good about himself because I'm doing well. That's fine for him, and that's why
Yeah.
he's never removed a single meeting in the diary.
I think that's true, and I think the guy, what's his name, David Brooks, he wrote a book recently about mentorship, and how in late middle age you start getting this will to teach and share and give back your knowledge, and I think that's another way. It's like your mentor said, of there's a way that we've evolved as humans to give status in later life. It's through helping younger people, rise up, and then you feel good about that because that's part of you. And I think people do find that, naturally very rewarding, which is a lovely thing about the human condition.
Well, I hope that you have that ephemeral felt sense because you've helped so many people through your multiple books, especially the Status Game and all the podcasts that you appear on. I'm very, very delighted that you've came on mine. Well, thank you so much for this enjoyable chat.
No, thank you, David. Thank you for your excellent questions. I feel glad to have been on your podcast. Thanks for inviting me.